In a small green village lived a young girl named Immani. Orphaned from both parents, Immani was a poor girl who had not inherited her late parents' fortune. Her parents had been very wealthy, but they left no will. Shortly after their deaths, her aunts and uncles wasted no time in depriving her of all her parents' possessions. All they left her was an old house. On her own, Immani did odd jobs to finance her studies. She had no one to help her and was left to face her destiny alone. After taking all the money, her aunts and uncles returned to claim the old house once more. They demanded that she marry a man of their choosing if she wanted to keep the house. Despite the young girl's suffering, they showed no mercy. If Immani wanted to stay in the house, she had no choice but to give in to their demands and marry a man she didn't even know. With nowhere else to turn, Immani reluctantly accepted. Her aunts and uncles exploited her marriage to profit as much as they could. She was married off to a charming but very wealthy young man, and through her husband, her family began to benefit financially once again. After the wedding, Newton, her husband, took Immani to town. Preoccupied with his business and earning money, Newton was not particularly talkative. Feeling the need to connect, Immani initiated the conversation. "Can you tell me more about yourself?" she asked. He replied, "I'm very rich, and all I care about right now is making more money. As you know, I'm very rich." Immani laughed calmly and replied, "Yes, of course I know. I also know your likes and dislikes." Newton replied, "What I like is money, and what I don't like is being penniless." Surprised by his answer, she asked, "Are there things you hate? Routines that are part of your daily life?" He replied curtly, "Are you doing an inspection? Or are you a private detective now?" Immani smiled and responded, "I just want to know a little more about you, given our marital situation. We're going to be living together, so it's only natural that I'd want to get to know you better." At this, the young man replied, "Your aunts and uncles told me you weren't educated, but I can already see the opposite." Realizing there was no point in continuing the conversation, as he seemed uninterested, Immani decided to drop the subject. "We'll talk later," she said. "I wish you a good night." Newton wished her good night too, and asked her to go to bed in their room. "I've only known one room since I've been here, and it's mine. I didn't know there was a room for us," she explained. "I've always slept downstairs." Newton insisted that she go to her room to gather her things and move into their shared bedroom. She retrieved her belongings, and together, they settled in. The next morning, very early, Immani noticed that her husband was no longer there. Had he already left for work? Immani wondered about her situation as she went about her housework. She cleaned up and put everything in its place, then cooked a meal for herself and her husband. When Newton arrived home, she asked him to take a shower and join her at the table. To her surprise, Newton replied, "I'm not hungry. I already ate in town before coming home. You can eat without me." Immani replied sadly, "But I made this food for both of us." The young man snapped, "Listen, don't get on my nerves. Don't think you're already my wife. I'm just married to you so I can send photos when I need them." Dazed, she repeated, "You're married to me for photos?" "Yes," he replied. "It's just for my parents, who keep asking me if I'm married. At least now I can send them pictures, so they'll leave me alone." Immani's heart sank. "Is that why you slept with me yesterday?" she asked. Newton's response was blunt. "Yes." Feeling trapped, Immani asked, "If you already have the photos, can I go back to my village?" "No," Newton replied firmly. "My parents are unpredictable. They could ask me for proof at any time. I can't take that risk." Frustrated, Immani said, "I can't live like this. If I'm married to you, then I have expectations too. If you can't fulfill them, then just let me go back to my village." "Impossible," Newton cried. "I didn't spend so much money just to let you go like that." Do you know how much I paid your aunts and uncles to have you?" Immani's voice trembled as she asked, "Did you marry me? Or did you buy me?" "Both," Newton replied shamelessly. Seeing no other way forward, Immani tried to reason with him. "If you can't let me return to the village, could you at least help me set up a business? That way, I won't be bored at home. At least I'd have something to do during the day while you're away." Newton dismissed her request without hesitation. "No, I didn't buy a TV for nothing. You don't need to work. This house has everything you need, and if you get bored, there's the TV." At that moment, Immani fully realized her situation. She was merely being used to fool Newton's parents. Any hope for a genuine partnership in this marriage had been extinguished. When Newton was in the bedroom, his mother called, as she usually did. This time, she was addressing her daughter-in-law. "When are you going to give me grandchildren?" she asked. "Soon," Immani replied. After the call, Newton confronted her. "Why did you tell her you were going to give her grandchildren? You should have said no." "I did it to help you," she replied. "I just made sure your parents didn't suspect anything." "Well, you shouldn't have said that," he retorted. "I don't feel the need to get married yet, let alone have children. When I'm ready, I'll marry a woman who's truly right for me, and with her, I'll have my children." Immani, hurt by his words, asked, "But what about me? I'm a woman too, and I have expectations." Newton replied coldly, "You're not of my social standing. Besides, you've got dirty hair and old people's clothes." "If my hair and clothes bother you so much," she shot back, "then I'll find a job myself to earn money and change these old things, as you call them." In response, Newton handed her a large sum of money. "Here," he said. "Use this to buy new clothes and redo your hair." After their conversation, Immani quietly took her belongings and moved downstairs while Newton stayed upstairs. She also placed all the money he had given her back on his bed. "I don't need it," she thought. "He works all day, so hopefully I can find a job myself. I won't tell him, since he won't help me anyway. Luckily, I still have my certificate." Feeling determined, she happily went out to apply for jobs. After visiting several places, she finally found a position at an electronics store, where she would be in charge of sales. That evening, when Newton came home, he realized he had forgotten to buy food. Hungry, he went to the kitchen to see if there was anything to eat. To his surprise, Immani had prepared a meal. Unable to resist, he helped himself on the sly. At the first bite, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow, this meal is so delicious. I had no idea she could cook so well. But if I ask her to cook for me, she'll think she's my wife. And I don't want to take that risk." He quickly swallowed a few mouthfuls and hurried to his room before Immani could catch him. Once there, he noticed the money he had given her earlier that morning, still lying on the bed. "Why didn't you take the money I gave you this morning?" he asked her. "I don't need it," she replied. "If you don't think of me as your wife, then I don't need to look good for you. I don't consider you my husband either, so you can keep your money." Newton said, "I'm not giving you money for fun. You have to look clean in the photos so my parents don't suspect anything. They've already made enough remarks about your clothes. You need to change them. In that case, I'll lend you the money to change your look and hairstyle, but you'll have to pay me back later," he added firmly. "Tomorrow, when I return from work, I want to see a difference," he ordered. Immani asked if she could leave now, and he replied indifferently, "You can sleep here, if you want, or in your room." She decided to go to her room to sleep. The next day, Newton went to work as usual. Immani also went her own way, making sure to return home as quickly as possible before Newton arrived. She used the money to buy some new clothes and changed her hairstyle, as he had requested. In the evening, Newton realized he had forgotten his keys, so he knocked on the door. Immani came to open it. Instead of entering, he just stood there, staring at her. She finally broke the silence. "You've been standing here for 3 minutes. If you don't want to go inside, tell me so I can close the door." "Wow," he finally said. "You look beautiful tonight. And you've got a wonderful figure," he admired. "Now, please go inside or go home," Immani replied. "I haven't got all day. I'm watching a film." Newton entered but couldn't stop staring at her. Eventually, he asked her to serve him some food, saying, "I'm very hungry." "Since when do you eat my food?" she retorted. "You said you didn't want any, so I didn't cook." He then requested that she cook something for him while he took a bath. Immani, caught off guard, hadn't planned to cook that evening and didn't know what to make. Finally, she decided to prepare instant noodles for him. As Newton ate, he found himself unable to focus on the food. He was captivated by her beauty. Her new look emphasized her curves, and her elegance mesmerized him. All he could do was stare and think to himself, "She looks really beautiful tonight." No matter how hard he tried to focus on other thoughts, like the money, her face kept coming back to trouble him. Before retiring for the night, he asked her, "When you finish your film, come sleep in our room." Immani was annoyed. "I don't feel like it. I'd rather sleep in my room." "You're my wife, I'm your husband, and you have to do what I ask," Newton insisted. "So tonight, you'll sleep in our room." Immani wondered if he was acting strangely. First, he'd eaten her food, and now he wanted her to sleep in their room. She replied firmly, "I won't come. I feel more comfortable in my room." "Look, I'm the one who decides," Newton continued, and without further ado, he began to move Immani's belongings back to their shared room. A husband and wife have to sleep in the same room, and that's what we are. From now on, you'll stay here and sleep here. Forget about your room. "What's happening to you tonight?" Immani asked, confused. "Just turn off the TV and come sleep next to your husband," he replied. Against her wishes, Immani turned off the TV. That night, they slept arm in arm, like true lovers. All day long, Newton couldn't stop wondering what was going on with him. Normally, he had only married Immani for the photos, but now he found himself deeply attracted to her. How did I end up liking a peasant girl? This wasn't my plan, he repeated to himself. I've got to concentrate on my work and forget about this girl. She's not even of my social standing. A respectable man like me shouldn't be interested in an ordinary girl like her. For her part, Immani was also perplexed. How could he change his mind so quickly? I hope I have nothing to fear from him. With people like that, you can expect anything. That day, Newton decided to hurry home after work. He'd been so distracted that his thoughts kept returning to Immani. When he arrived, he found that she wasn't there. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3, but still no sign of her. Angry and frustrated, he wondered where she could be. Finally, he went outside to see if she was around. From a distance, he saw a car approaching the house. Recognizing Immani inside the car, he went back into the house to wait for her. When she entered the room, Newton was furious. "Where have you been, madam?" he demanded. From Newton's angry red face, Immani already knew she was in trouble. Trembling, she replied, I went to get something." "Where is this thing you went to get?" Newton asked sharply. "I ate it on the way. It was food," Immani replied. With a look of disgust on his face, Newton snapped, "Not only are you a liar, but you're also a prostitute. What could you possibly need to eat that would take you more than 3 hours? Don't you know you're a married woman? And who was the person who brought you back?" "It was just someone helping me. That's all," she explained, "and I'm not a prostitute." "A cheap prostitute, that's what you are," Newton exclaimed angrily. "Can't you think of something better to do?" Annoyed, Immani shot back. "Yes, I'm a prostitute now. Why do you care? Aren't we just married for the pictures? I'm free to do what I want and manage my life as I see fit. I use my body, not yours." Newton retorted, "It's not just your body anymore. It's mine too. I paid good money for your dowry. You're mine. I have every right over you because you belong to me now." "Why does that make you so angry?" Immani asked coolly. "You've always said you plan to marry a woman who suits you and have your children with her. So why not let me do what I want?" "Listen, young lady," Newton continued, "from now on, you're not going out to buy anything. If you have to leave this house, it will be with me. I don't trust you anymore." Immani stood her ground. "I'm not a prostitute, and I never will be. I'm a woman with principles and values, and I won't allow you to treat me like one. You don't have to forbid me from doing anything." "All right, enough talk," Newton replied dismissively. "I'm going to try and believe what you're telling me today. Now, make me something to eat. From now on, I'll have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at home. I won't pay for meals outside anymore." "Okay, I'll do it if that's what you want," she agreed, heading to the kitchen to prepare his meal. As soon as the food was served, Newton refused to eat alone. He told Immani that she should join him at the table. Despite her protests, she finally gave in, knowing there was no point in arguing with him. They ate together and later retired to their room, where they slept together. Newton had been coming home every afternoon for a month now, but his wife was never at home. He didn't confront her because he wanted to investigate on his own. Determined to find out where she went every day, he decided to follow her. The next morning, instead of going to work, Newton waited in his car without Immani noticing. Once she was ready, she stepped out of the house and took a cab. Newton followed closely behind, tailing the cab until it stopped in front of a store. Puzzled, he wondered what his wife was doing there. He watched as she went inside and started working as a salesperson. Relieved, Newton thought to himself, "At least she's not cheating on me. If I had confronted her without knowing, it might have gone badly. I'm glad she works here." Feeling reassured, he went back home to rest, exhausted from the stress he had been putting himself through. Now, he finally had peace of mind. That evening, when Immani returned, she saw that Newton's car was already parked outside. Dread filled her heart as she realized he would likely be furious again, and this time, there might be no way out. When she entered the bedroom to drop off her bag, she found Newton waiting for her. His expression was stern. "So where were you this time?" Newton asked. "Don't tell me you went shopping again, because I've been home all morning, and you weren't here." Immani replied quickly, "I didn't feel well. I had a fever and a terrible headache, so I went to rest." Newton, unimpressed, pressed further. "And could you give me a convincing reason why you haven't been home since morning?" Avoiding his question, Immani said, "Let me get you some medicine." "No, don't bother," Newton snapped. "I've already taken medicine, and I feel much better now. Stop pretending to ignore my question. Just tell me where you've been. If you don't answer me, I'll leave this house for good, and you won't see me again." "Don't do that," she replied. "I know you won't be happy to hear where I've been and what I've been doing, but please don't think I'm a prostitute. In fact, I went to work. I got a job as a store assistant. I was really bored at home, and I have my diplomas. So why should I stay at home doing nothing? This way, I can earn my own money, and my diploma would finally be useful." Newton, surprised, replied, "Why should my wife work as a sales representative?" "How do you know I'm a sales rep?" wondered Immani. "And why do you keep calling me your wife?" She didn't understand. Newton looked at her and sighed. "Immani, at first I married you just to fool my parents. so I could send them photos whenever they asked. But now, I've changed my mind. You mean a lot more to me because I've fallen in love with you. If your desire is to work, then I won't stop you. But this time, you'll work with me. In my office. No, our office, he corrected himself. Immani was surprised. I don't know what to say. I'm amazed at what you're telling me. Refresh yourself and get ready. We're going out, he suggested. I'm very tired today, and I don't feel like going out, she replied. Okay, next time then, he said. Immani was happy as she thought to herself, he's in love with me now. I wondered when that moment would come. And to think, I'm in love with him too. But I'll make sure he doesn't realize it just yet. I'll take my time to turn him, and my aunts and uncles, around a bit first. Since I've been here, I've been happy in a way he could never have imagined. I was supposed to suffer, but instead, I'm very happy. I'm in heaven. She went to sleep that night feeling deeply content and full of hope. The next day, as agreed, Newton took Immani to the mall for some shopping and to get her hair done. He was now so attentive and caring that she couldn't help but wonder if this was really the same man she had married. When they finished shopping, they went home to get ready for a romantic evening. While they were chatting, Newton suddenly knelt down in front of her, pulled out a ring, and asked, "Do you want to be my wife?" There were so many people around that evening, all admiring the scene. Immani laughed and replied, "No, we're already married." Newton smiled but continued, "Will you be my love? Will you love and cherish me as your husband?" She laughed again and teased him, "You can't even make a proper declaration. All you know about is your business." But Newton wasn't joking. He was serious. He pressed on, "I'm in love with you. Are you in love with me too?" Finally, she said, "Get up." She kissed him and added, "I've had a wonderful evening, but I'm tired from laughing so much. Let's go home." She held out her ring finger to Newton, who smiled and slid the ring onto her finger. The crowd erupted into applause, and the admiration in the eyes of the women present was unmistakable. They all wished to be in Immani's shoes. On the way home, Newton said, "You almost made a fool of me today at the mall." Immani laughed, amused. "So I'm not going to be reminded of your annoying request," she teased. "What would you like to eat tonight?" Newton asked. "I still haven't digested the ice cream I had at the mall, so I don't want anything," she replied. When they arrived home, Newton headed upstairs, and Immani followed him. "But I'm just kidding with you," she said, smiling. "I want to be left alone, so leave me alone." "Okay, good night," Newton replied. "I'm going to sleep in my room tonight." "Yes, good night. Don't talk to me tomorrow either," Immani said with a playful tone. "Oh, he's angry," she teased. "My lovely husband, you're so beautiful like that. I love you. Sleep well." At these words, Newton stood up abruptly. "Please repeat what you just said." "But I thought you were already asleep," she scoffed. "Don't you sleep anymore? Please repeat it," Newton almost begged. "I love you, my lovely husband," she said with a smile. Newton's face lit up. Hearing her say she loved him filled him with joy. He took her into his arms, showered her with kisses, and they kissed deeply. Tonight was different. This time, they slept together as true lovers. The next day, they both got ready, and Newton took Immani to his company. When they arrived, Immani couldn't help exclaiming, "Wow, it's so beautiful here. Is this your company? Or do you just work here?" She couldn't believe her eyes. She had never seen anything so grand and impressive. Newton smiled and told her, "This is my company, and from now on, you'll be working here too." Teasingly, he added, "You'll be my employee, but I won't pay you any money." Immani laughed. "I'd rather do that than sit at home all day doing nothing." Besides, this way I can admire you all the time." "I agree with you," Newton replied with a smirk. "You'll work here, but I'll stay on the other side so we can concentrate better." He introduced her to the company staff, showed her around, and explained everything she needed to know about her new role. Once the inspection was over, they headed home. At home, Newton's mother called. Her tone was sharp as she said, "I'm very angry with you, Immani. You don't want to give me grandsons like you promised." "Good night, Mom," Immani replied, trying to deflect. "When are you coming back?" his mother asked. "Not before you give me grandsons," she snapped. Immani sighed and said, "Mommy, it's your son who doesn't want to have children yet. He doesn't want to touch me." "Give him the phone. I want to see his face," she demanded. Newton, caught off guard, immediately responded, "Mom." "No, Mom. I'm ready to have as many children as you want," Newton replied. Confused, his mother said, "Since you two can't seem to make up your minds, I'll give you a year to introduce me to my grandson or granddaughter. After a year, I'll come visit you and your father to meet our grandchild." "Consider it done, Mom," Immani replied confidently. They wished each other good night and ended the call. Suddenly, Newton turned to Immani and asked, "Why did you tell Mom you'd give her a grandson or granddaughter in a year? And why did you say I wasn't touching you?" "I just said what was," she replied. "Have you ever touched me before? Or were you waiting for me to make the first move?" Newton looked at her and said, "You could have told me if you wanted to. I didn't want to move too fast with you, let alone do something you wouldn't want." "Will you ever be able to be a little romantic?" she teased. "Well, you want me to be an entrepreneur, so I will. You'll be the first to ask me to stop," he replied with a grin. "Come into my arms." That night, they shared their first truly intimate moment together. As time went on, they worked hard to grow their businesses. Together they built several successful ventures in different towns. Newton and Immani also traveled to her village to collect all the goods sold by her parents. The villagers admired Immani. She was radiant, a completely transformed woman. Who would have thought that she, once considered destined for a sad and difficult life, would blossom into such a beautiful and magnificent person? Despite the torment her aunts and uncles had put her through, Immani had hardly given in. She and her husband even established a thriving business in her village, making a meaningful contribution to her hometown. Months later, Immani discovered she was pregnant. The news was nothing short of wonderful and incredible. She later gave birth to a healthy baby boy. As promised, her mother-in-law and father-in-law came to visit, overjoyed to meet their grandson. The family was now complete, close-knit, and happy. Immani's aunts and uncles, who had once hoped to ruin her life by forcing her into a marriage with a man she didn't know, saw their plan backfire spectacularly. In the end, it worked entirely in Immani's favor. She and Newton, along with their family, lived happily ever after. If you enjoyed this story, leave me a little encouragement, and let me know in the comments which country you're following me from.